Welcome to She Sells Radio. So, I think this conversation is going to be so transformational for you. And one of my favorite quotes is that everything you want is on the other side of fear. And if you're like so many of the women who I serve, then you have big goals and big dreams and big vision for your life. But those can also feel really scary and uncertain. And so, my guest today is the embodiment of somebody who went for her big goals and dreams, even though they felt scary, and has had so much success along the way. And she made the very brave leap from a traditional successful career as a medical doctor to more of a non-traditional successful career as a coach and a business mentor for wellness entrepreneurs. So Dr. Kim Foster, welcome to She Sells Radio. We are thrilled to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Elyse. I'm so happy to be here and I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it's going to be so great. And so here's what I want to know, and what I bet other people want to know too, is take us back to before you were doing what you do now. And I'm imagining you've got this quote unquote secure, cushy job as a medical doctor you've been doing for 20 years to, something. Tell us about what was in you that was making you want to make that change, and what that process was like when you made that leap to becoming a coach and mentor for wellness professionals as you do now.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And it was a long and convoluted journey because there was just a lot of reasons why. There was a ton of inner conflict, outer conflict. Like there was just a lot of stuff that was keeping me where I was because exactly like you say, I was in a well-paying, well-respected, very conventional successful career, right? It's not easy to start to tune into the voice that says, this isn't for you anymore. Maybe it was, but it's just like, it's really hard to swim upstream in that way. And so that was a big sort of underlying factor that was going on. But yeah, we're
How
talking
did
about like,
Yeah, and I want to pause you there. How did you know? So kind of take us back. So you've been this medical doctor, and when did this voice start? How did it show up? Did you try to suppress it for a while? And what made you start to tune into it?
yeah. So I actually graduated medical school in 1997. So it was a long, long, long time ago. I did my residency in family medicine. And when I look back on it now, I actually had that voice way, way back, like first year medical school. Because, of course, I decided that I wanted to be a doctor when I was 17, right?
Mm.
When I was in high school, I was a baby. I didn't know anything about anything. But being a doctor is a very, I was good in science and I was good in school. And so there's all kinds of reasons why it made sense. And I got a lot of approval from, anybody who I would meet about, yeah, that's
Sure.
amazing. Like, it was just like a dopamine hit every time I would mention what I intended to do with my life, right? Like
Sure.
adults are always asking, what are you going to do? So there was all of that, and so for me, I'm very achievement oriented. I think I always have been. And so setting my sights on getting into medical school was a big, it just gave structure to my whole life as like a young woman. And so that was what I was on the train to get into medical school. And that was my whole focus. And then once I arrived at med school, that first year, I had a bit of an identity crisis. I started to think,
Mm.
what is this actually what I want? Is this actually, now I'm here, now I've achieved this thing that lots of people attempt to achieve, and, it's competitive, all of those things. And I had a really tough time in the first 6 months or so of medical school. And, but I suppressed it exactly like you said, right? Because there were so many external, validation and my peers and my family, and, everybody was in support of doing this thing. So I suppressed the doubts and I suppressed that intuition that maybe there were some things that weren't really in alignment with who I wanted to be and the life that I wanted to create for myself. And I just kept on. I put my head down and I just kept on doing the work through med school, through residency, through building a practice, like all of that stuff.
What
So
would you, I
yes.
actually, I want to pause you there, like with the perspective you have now, because I want to go into more of the story, but I think what you said there, Dr. Kim, is so important, is that you suppressed your instincts and your intuition. And that's actually when I'm working with women on their sales process, that's the number one problem that I see, is that they're suppressing their instincts, their desires. I did that in so many ways for so many years. So looking back on it now, what would you have told yourself in that moment?
It's such an interesting question. And I'm not sure, I have thought about this a lot. And I have actually wondered, should I have stopped right then and there? Should I have dropped out of med school and pursued a different path right at that point? And I have to say, it's actually a little hard for me to answer that, because I'm not sure that I regret getting the training and having and starting to work as a physician, because I mean, it was, talk about your transformative experience, like medical school, residency, working as a physician. I mean, it was an incredible thing. And I learned so much about myself, about the human condition, about people, about life and death. And like, there were so many things that, I mean, it just shaped so much of who I am today. So it's hard for me to say I should have just cut and run at that point.
Sure.
But what I will say though, is that I did stay in medicine for way too long. I really, the signs were all there. The signposts were there that this was not, maybe it was a decent foundation for where I wanted to go in life, but I really stayed in it for too long. And there's lots of reasons why that happened, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which, and I appreciate you sharing that too, because I think even the things we can look back on now with perspective in our lives and say, well, even though maybe now I would do something differently, it was all happening for me, right? Because it helped shape you to be who you are now. So tell us about when, I guess, the voice started getting really strong, that it was time for you to leave, and how you trusted yourself. Because I know you said there was internal conflict, there was external conflict, which regardless of whether a woman is looking to leave a corporate career or not, there's situations in our lives that no longer serve us in a certain way, whether it's job, career, relationship. Sometimes we take on clients that we think we need the money, so we take on a client that we just know deep down we shouldn't, and that voice gets louder and louder. So tell us about what some of those inner and outer conflicts were that were going on for you that made you stay longer, and then how you ultimately decided to make that leap.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So then fast forward, I guess, from where I like completed all my training and everything. And then I had been practicing for several years. And I like to describe it as, it was kind of a perfect storm of things that happened to me all in a fairly short period of time. So for one thing, I was a new mom. Like, I had very young, I had two boys, they were very young at the time. And so my priorities had shifted hugely, of course, right? So like, my priorities as 20 something medical resident were different than when I was a practicing physician with kids at home, who I, wanted and needed to prioritize. But I found myself in a career that really was not in support of that, right? Also, professionally, I really was, so disillusioned with the medical profession, right? The healthcare system has so many flaws. We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of that, because I'm sure that many people are aware, but it's just, there's so many things that are broken about our system. And I was, functioning deep inside it and having to uphold a lot of principles that no longer that I didn't believe in anymore. And so professionally, I was really disconnected from what was going on and what I was expected and meant to uphold. So personally, I had my priority was my family. Professionally, I was not on board anymore. And then also I had my own health crisis, of course, as we all do. That's the thing for so many people. I've talked to so many women who have had, a total pivot and change in direction. And that's often, sadly, the thing that kicks us out of that status into what we really need to, like, a real wake-up call, of course, as cliche as it sounds, but that's where it is. So yeah, the stress of all of that just really manifested in an autoimmune condition that kind of came out of the blue. I'd been super healthy before, and then I had this really rare autoimmune condition that just descended upon me and changed everything. And fortunately, it was self-limited, and it resolved, and I'm totally fine now. But there was a period of a couple of months there where I was in real trouble, and it
Mm.
really did a lot of journaling because I couldn't get out of bed. So I
Yeah.
did a lot of journaling and figuring out, okay, something really, really needs to change. So yeah.
How did you coach yourself through that? Because I can only imagine in that moment, you've got the emotional stress of being disillusioned with what you're doing and not feeling in alignment, and then the compounded physical stress as well. Did you have any, I know you said you did a lot of journaling, and I'm curious, and I know we're getting really specific here, but I want to really pull out some specific things that women can do if they're kind of in that moment of like, oh my gosh, I know I need to make a change, but it feels scary. What were some of the specific ways you coached yourself through that?
Well, I really immersed myself into a whole world that I really hadn't been aware of before. I just started reading a lot. I read a lot of books about happiness. To be honest, is actually because I was like, I've been so unhappy, and this is threatening my life at the moment. So I need to figure out just really bare bones how to be happy. So I started
Wow.
reading all these books about, like, because positive psychology was this emerging thing at the time, like, the happiness project hadn't been
Sure.
published yet. Like, there was just all sorts of stuff. So I immersed myself in thinking differently about things, because I had been trained with this paradigm, very masculine in medicine, very evidence based. It's all about the structure and concrete and what you can prove and what you can do, and all of that. And I gave myself permission to um, really open my mind to a totally different way of living and choosing and experiencing life. So that's what I did.
Wow. Well, and I love that you said that, Dr. Kim, because, one of my favorite, I don't know if Abraham Hicks said it originally or not, but I'm a huge Abraham Hicks listener. And one of the things that they talk about so much is like, what is success? And the definition that they give is it's happiness. Success is happiness. And we think it's something else. For so much of my life, I thought it was a dollar amount, an accolade, a car. And you realize that you're seeking those things because you think they'll make you happy, when in reality, you actually have the ability to create happiness in your life through your thoughts, through alignment, through getting out of those situations that no longer serve, and learning that everything you need is internal. So I love that you shared that. Thank you for that, because I think when we can redefine success as happiness, then it's like we can have it now. And everything else is gravy. And everything else also comes when we are happier too. So that's beautiful. So you did a lot of journaling, you focused on happiness, and then what was that like when you told, I can't imagine telling family and friends like, hey, I'm leaving this and I'm going to go do this coaching thing, and there's probably fear of judgment, fear of like not making money maybe. I mean, I don't know, walk us through the fears any fears and any judgments that you got from other people or from yourself about doing this.
There were so many of those. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking. Those were all the things. So
Yeah.
I had all sorts of reasons to make a change, and then I had a lot of things that were standing in my way. So
Yeah.
yes, talking to people, like to colleagues. I mean, I kept it secret for a long time because it just really was. It's not an acceptable thing to talk about,
Mm.
or that's how I felt anyway. But the people that I did share, just really, it was just bizarre land. Like, why would you do that? Like, why would you leave this? And then people who were outside of the profession, like family, friends, honestly, anybody who I would have a chance to talk to about this, who I happened to, share this journey that I was on, where there was just a total disconnect. Like, why would you do that? You worked so hard to get where you are, is the kind of things
Mm.
that I would say. Or you put in all those years in medical school and getting where you are, and why would you just throw that all away? And I came to hate that. Like, I really bristled against that because it doesn't make any sense. it really like, and and I thought about why is this, why do they keep saying this to me? Like, why is this the prevailing view, is that just because I have, achieved this thing and put all these invested years and time and money into this career, why did I get this education to limit my choices? No, that's not why
Mm,
I did it, right? I
yeah.
didn't do it to only give myself one thing that I could ever do for the rest of my life. You're committed to this now. The thing that you decided when you were 17, you have to stay in it until your deathbed, right?
That's a great
And
point. Yeah, that's a great point because we kind of think about it that way, right? Like, oh, it's the sunk cost there. Got to put so much time and effort into it. And, but that's such a good point. You didn't do it to limit your choices. So keep going. But I just think people can apply that to anything that they're feeling
oh,
stuck in. And that's great.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean, just because you have, you took a certain path doesn't mean that you are forced to stay on that path
Yeah.
forever. If you are feeling called to, color outside the lines and go a different direction. But it is not easy to do, because so I was going against, all of that external judgment, and then also all of my own identity stuff came up, of course,
Mm,
because since a very young age, I had identified as a physician, right? Like, this was my whole identity. And that profession in particular, I've talked to a lot and worked with a lot of women who have changed their careers. And the ones who have the hardest time letting go of it are doctors, other
yeah.
doctors who are, because I'm not the only one. There's loads and loads of other physicians who are similarly, but it's a really tough one because it just gets so imbued in your identity. It really becomes, you just take it on, that this is who you are. And so it's terrifying to be considering, okay, well, if I'm not doing that anymore, who am I? Like, that's a really scary prospect, right?
Yeah.
So that was tough. Um, and then practical considerations, specifically money. Like,
Yeah.
it's not easy to replace a physician's income with something that is not, established in the same way. Like, what I often say to my clients who are doctors is, when you decide you want to be a physician, it's a very well worn path. You just follow along. You're like, okay, this is what I do. I just take this step, this step. There's tons of mentorship, lots of role models, all of that. You can see clearly exactly what you have to do. It's a recipe. And then at the end of it, you're a doctor, and then you can function as a physician. Like, it's so clearly laid out. But
Yeah.
doing something else, like building an online business, becoming a coach, like all that stuff it does not have a clear path, because it's so much newer as a profession, and it's so much more like, there's so many other options. And,
Yeah.
anyway, so that all of that stuff was scary, and kept me stuck for a very long time.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, and so when you made that leap, what was that? So here's what I want to know is I want to know what was it like the day you made the leap and what's your perspective now on the other side? So kind of take us back to that day when you finally did it. Let's start there.
Yeah. So the day was more like an internal shift than an
Mm,
external one. I think it wasn't, because it still took some time for me to actually have my external world, manifest
sure.
in what was going on in my inside world. But the internal shift has to come first, of course. Like, it has to be an inner decision. And so, I mean, really, it looked like me going for a walk in the woods with my phone, listening to a podcast.
I
that's
love that.
that's
As every big life epiphany happens, right? Either like in the shower or on a like in the woods. That's great.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think I was listening to a podcast about going pro, the
Hmm.
difference between like dabbling and going pro.
Yeah.
And because I had been dabbling for a while, like I had been sort of on the side, like secretly early in the mornings, researching, what does it mean? Like, what could I actually do? How could I pursue this? Because I really wanted to do more like wellness, more coaching, less like medicine, right? And really just do
Right.
something completely different than clinical practice. Um, yeah, but so I had been researching, and I'd been sort of like half stepping into it, right? Like, keeping one foot nice and safe, and then kind of dabbling in the other. And this, the guest on this podcast was talking about that, most people are just dabbling. And what could happen if you actually decided to go pro, like you invested in yourself, if you invested in, like, energy wise, financially, and just made that commitment to not dabble anymore, but actually go all in. Because it's scary, right? Because then we are risking, we're vulnerable, all of those kinds of things. But and I just had that moment. I was like, that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been just kind of like playing at this a little bit, and hedging my bets, and being all safe about it and all sensible about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, nope, I am actually, this is enough, and I'm going pro on this. So yeah, that's what that looked like.
And then I'm assuming, so tell us, like, you turned in your resignation, you left. I know it wasn't like an immediate process, but how long was that full process then of leaving medicine to go into your coaching?
Yeah, altogether, it was a few months actually that I went from like making that decision to actually letting the people, like the powers that be, my boss
Yeah.
at the clinic, like all of that stuff, know that this is what I was doing. And so, and there was a lot of journaling that happened during that period.
Always a lot of journaling, right?
Yes. Yeah. And like working it out from like an identity perspective, and and also from a practical thing too, right? Like figuring out the financials. Can I actually do this? Can I actually make this happen? And yeah. And so that's how that all went. But yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that I'd love to just get your wisdom on now is the identity piece, because I think, to your point, we get so wrapped up in, this is who I am, this is what I do, and whether that's, as a physician or as I had an experience several years ago where I was a partner in this 8-figure international sales coaching company, and then had really built a strong identity around that and got a lot of satisfaction from that. And there was ego, and there's like all of that. And then overnight it all went away because of some corporate inner turmoil, and feeling like naked and vulnerable. And who am I now? And do I matter now? How did you work through the identity piece? Because I think that's that's like, you bring up a really good point. And it's not always something that we maybe are consciously aware of when we're looking to make a big shift, is like, the thing that could be holding you back is the unknown identity of who you're stepping into. So how did you work through that for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, it was a really long process. It took a lot of time. And even when I thought that I had actually come to terms with it, even when I thought that I was like, I am moving onwards and upwards to bigger and better things, I still surprised myself on my very last day in clinical medicine. So this was supposed to be like hallelujah day. I had been preparing for this for years and years and years and years. And and I thought that it was just going to be only like happiness and excitement. And I had to close my door and cry my face off, like ugly cry, because I was it was like a death. It was like a death, which is, of course, leads to the, rebirth, but it had to happen. And even though I was so beyond excited, like I was giddy, like that morning, I was like joking. I was like, bye-bye. Like I thought that I was going to be nothing but thrilled. And I just found myself completely slammed with all of this emotion, like just bubbled right up to the surface, that you're letting this go. And this has been a core piece of what you've been, even though on so many levels emotionally I had let it go years ago, but there was still that remnant of like that. It was like an umbilical cord still that it still needed to be cut. And that was that moment, like on my very last day, I had to close the door and just bawl my eyes out. And then that, I think, was incredibly cathartic, because since that day, I haven't looked back. I have been, it's been nothing but, just it's so validating. I needed to do it, and clearly, and it's been just so amazing, such an
Yeah.
amazing journey since then.
Yeah. Well, and tell us a little bit about where you are now. So just for context, and like how long you've been running your own business and where you're at with that and where you've gone since that fateful day that you were crying with the office door closed.
Yeah, so I have, I mean, my whole like journey out of clinical medicine, it started with, I needed to get out of like the conventional medical paradigm of
Yeah.
prescriptive, you know, patriarchal medicine and into more of a wellness um, approach. And so I journeyed into being a wellness coach. And then because I was really enjoying it, although of course I was still working in clinical medicine at that point, like those were my phases of like half and half, kind of one foot in the world, one foot out. So I was wellness coaching on the side of being a physician. But then because I was getting more and more into that world, really loving being in that whole coaching just universe, and that's when I started just organically kind of helping other coaches to on their mentor, like building their businesses, and first of all in more of a peer kind of thing, but then it really evolved into I decided that I needed to get more education into actually business and marketing and being a business mentor and being a business coach. So that is actually that's where I am right now, to answer your question, is that now my primary function is my company is business mentorship and training for people who are wanting to become wellness coaches, wanting to escape what it is that they're doing right now, because there's a lot of people who are unhappy in what they're doing right now, and I can attest to that. And really feel called to move into pursuing that passion for wellness and building a beautiful career out of that. So that's what I do now, is that I help women who are really called to helping others and build a flexible, freedom-based business in wellness. And so that's how I fill my days now, and I absolutely love it. And it just lights me up in a way that that medicine just simply never did, really. So I love it.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. And one of the things that I would love to know, just as we start to kind of wrap here, is what have you learned about trusting yourself along the way? This is one of the biggest things that I am passionate about teaching women how to do, is to learn to trust themselves again. And no doubt there was so much trusting and looking inward instead of outward in your journey and in your story. So what have you learned, and what would you share to a woman who is wanting to learn how to trust herself again?
Well, so much of it comes down to like listening to that inner voice, right? Like
Mm.
the one that we've talked about a couple of times here, is just really listening to that voice, paying attention to when your intuition, essentially, like your inner world, is telling you that something is off and out of alignment. And I know we all have it, but some of us are more powerful than others at suppressing it, right? And and but it really is it's a practice, it's a muscle, really, to listen to your own intuition and trust yourself and have the faith that you are going to be able to figure this out. Like for a long time I had that I needed a safety net. Like I really needed to know that if I was going to make this leap, I wasn't just going to like leap out of a perfectly functioning airplane without a parachute. Like that was not,
Right.
I couldn't do it. But and again, like journaling, I know I keep saying this, but really is
It's
journaling totally
powerful.
transformed everything for
Yeah.
me, because I was like, well, you know, I can figure this out. Even without a safety net, I know that I'm going to be absolutely fine. There are people out there who have very successful careers who didn't go to medical school. It's okay for you to not be a practicing physician. You will be okay. And I just had to repeat that and really like feel into that, and know that even without a safety net, I was still going to be okay. I was still
Mm.
going to be able to work it out.
Yeah.
Resourceful and smart, and I can figure this out.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, I love your story because I think it applies regardless of what the situation is, whether it's similar to yours or someone just looking to, like we said before, make a different type of leap in their life and make what feels like a scary decision, even though I truly believe that we can trust our desires in life and know that what we want is safe. And if we're being called to do something, that it is meant for us. And so I really appreciate how you shared your story of that, because it took bold moves, right? It took some health stuff coming up, but it took you tuning in and really being so bold and strong and brave in taking that action. And you're such a beautiful example of doing that and leaping into the unknown, which will in turn, I think, really inspire and motivate our listeners to do the same. It's certainly done that for me today. So Dr. Kim, tell people where they can connect with you if they want to get involved in what you're doing and find out more. Like tell them all the places they can connect and how they can work with you if they want to.
Yeah, well, I mean, for one thing, I have my own podcast, Marketing and Mindset for Wellness Coaches, specifically if you are a wellness coach and you're trying to build your business. And on that podcast, I talk about equal parts mindset and, strategy, right? Because they're both so crucial. And so that's a fun place to hang. That's a place where I am and hanging out and come and connect with me there. And also, I have for people because I know the pain of being stuck in a thing, in a career, in a life that it's just not for you anymore. And you are being called for something more, something different, but it is really just without that clearly defined pathway, it can be unnecessarily scary, right? And then it's easy to give into the fears. So that's why, I created a training, a 60-minute masterclass that people can watch and sign up for, that's called How to Chart a Path to Your Dream Career as a Wellness Coach. And I just put everything that I knew could help a person who really wants to chart their path, but just doesn't know how to make it all come together. So you can watch that at, it's drkimfoster.com/become a coach. If you are feeling called to, pursue that passion for wellness and become a wellness coach. But yeah, so that's another great place to learn from me. And I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Kim Foster, and I hang out there quite a bit too. So yeah.
Amazing. And so here's what I would love to know from you, just final piece of advice. And this has been so powerful and so it's helped me kind of re-anchor back into trusting myself as well, even more through those bold leaps. So I so appreciate everything you've shared. So for a woman who is ready to claim more in her life and ready to take big action, but feels scared, what would be your best piece of advice for her, for where she is right now?
I would say that it's like a two-step thing. It starts with getting really quiet and really just shutting out all of the outside stuff, because it's complicated and noisy out there. Other people's stories, other people's judgments, other people's, well-intentioned fears for you, all of that kind of stuff. And you have to tune all of that stuff out. You have to get quiet. You have to really turn the focus back in yourself and really get clear on what it is that you want and what your very next step is. And then the second part, of course, is taking that step, right? It's like actually taking the action. Don't spin in, just thinking about it, dreaming about it, fantasizing about it for too long. You do need to do that introspection. In my opinion, you need to have that inner work, and then you need to immediately follow it up by actually taking action, taking that first scary step.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah, nothing happens until you take that step. So I so appreciate that you shared that. And I just so encourage, for anybody, if you're looking to make that shift and potentially go into the wellness space, go attend Dr. Kim's masterclass. And then either way, like follow her on social, listen to her podcast. Just such a wealth of wisdom and inspiration for any woman who's looking to grow their business, create great change, in their life and in the world as well. So Dr. Kim, thank you so much for coming on today and for who you are. It's been a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Elyse. It's been an absolute pleasure. So great.
Amazing. All right, my friend, thank you so much for tuning in today to She Sells Radio. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and come join again next week. As you know, if you've been listening for any amount of time, every week we have incredible leaders in the sales and business space coming on to share their best practices with you so that you can scale your sales to 6 figures and beyond in your life. And so I'm just grateful to have you as a listener. Thank you so much. Go out and share this episode with someone who you think is going to need it, and have a beautiful rest of your week. We'll see you next week. Bye for now.